All right, welcome back to another episode. This episode is going to be a two-part series. This first part, we're going to be talking about retirement strategies for when you're in a residency. And the second part is going to be retirement strategies for when you've graduated residency and start making a little bit more money when you're in attending. So for this episode, I'm bringing on my friend and my neighbor, Tracy Cahill, who works in the financial department and in the financial sector and has some experience with how people invest their money and how people save for retirement. So I'm hoping he will help us understand basic terminology for when you're first starting off with your job coming out of medical school, some resources that you can look into if you want to dig a little bit deeper for your own personal financial strategies, and how we divvy up our money and how we know if we're saving enough for retirement. So without further ado, welcome Tracy to the show.
Thanks, Kenny. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. So do you want to go into a little bit about what your job is and who you work for?
Sure. So I work with Equitable Advisors. I started in the financial planning business in 2014. Got into the industry because I always, liked the idea of being able to kind of create my own schedule and working for myself. It's an incredible industry. It really lined up with a lot of my core values. And a main benefit was, I got to work with people, and that's something I always felt very comfortable doing. I always had, a lot of comfort talking with people and being a resource for them. So 5 or 6 years into my career, in 2020, I got into district management, which means on top of meeting with, individual clients, I also help bring some other advisors into the business and help train, develop, and mentor them as well.
Very cool. And did you want to talk about just a disclosure that you want to give on behalf of your company?
Yeah. So I always joke I have to put on my serious lawyer voice, but whenever we get kind of information like this, just a quick disclosure that I do need to read that no statements made should constitute as fiduciary recommendations, tax or legal advice. Information is intended to be educational and is not a solicitation for a service or a security. So that's what Perfect. I just have to get out there. Thank you.
Perfect. Now we got all the black and white lawyer stuff out of the way and we can just talk.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks for coming on here and shedding some light in a field and a sector of the world where we don't get too much financial literacy taught to us. And so we have to go out upon ourselves and either find out the information on the internet or books or reach out to people like you who sort of help us get off the ground and handle our first couple of paychecks. So what are some of the types of employers that you work with? And do you see any similarities to a resident who basically is coming out of higher education and making somewhere in the realm of 50 to 70K a year?
Yeah, absolutely. So our company has a very close tie with nonprofits. So we work with a lot of public schools, cities, and municipalities. So I have a lot of experience with working with, maybe it's a first or second year teacher, a first year, firefighter, a new policeman. So very familiar with those fields. It can be challenging, but I think some of the information that I'll give out today is going to let you know that it's all about starting somewhere, and that's the best advice that I could give to anybody.
Awesome. And what do you say is sort of the best first steps that somebody can take when they're starting a new job?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you want to look at your company or hospital or whoever your employer is. You want to look through their retirement plan. If I understand it correctly, sometimes residents do have a match available, sometimes they don't. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. But if there's a matching contribution that's available, you always want to look at that as free money and something that you want to be taking advantage of. So I think that's always a great place to start. But it's all about understanding what types of plans are available. If it's not getting matched, the advantages of an IRA, an individual retirement account, is probably just as advantageous as the hospital's 403B or 401k plan.
Perfect. So since you started talking some of those buzzwords, Roth IRA, traditional Roth, 401k and 403B are these letters and numbers that people kind of toss around very frequently. Can we just go into the definitions of what makes each of those what they are defined by? We can start with 403B versus 401k.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a little bit tricky because some hospitals call it a 403B, some call it a 401k. But the main differentiator is a 401k is going to be tied to a for-profit company, where a 403b is more often going to be tied to a non-for-profit. So it's more often than not, if I had to guess, 9 out of 10 hospitals, it's called a 403b plan. They have the same contribution limits, meaning you can contribute the same amount. It's just the 401k is going to be tied to a private sector company, and the 403 is going to be tied to a nonprofit.
Perfect. And then is this money coming out pre-tax or post-tax?
That's a great question. It's oftentimes depends on the plan design. So from a personal perspective, my company offers a 401k plan. I can contribute one of three ways. I can contribute pre-tax, where I get the tax benefits today, but when I take the money out in retirement, I'll have to pay taxes on it. I have a Roth option, meaning I don't get any tax benefits today or this year, but all the growth on that account will be tax-free when I take it out in retirement. And then there's also what's called an after-tax contribution, which can be a little bit tricky. Not many employers offer it, but it's basically a fancy way to, build up more of a Roth savings.
Perfect. Okay, so moving now into the Roth account, what's the difference between the traditional Roth and a Roth IRA?
So traditional IRA is very similar to a pre-tax 401k. You get the tax benefits, so you're allowed to contribute up to $6,500 per year. If you're over the age of 50, they allow you to do a little bit more. It's $7,500. And every dollar you contribute to that plan is going to come off of this year's taxable income. So if you're making $100,000, you contribute $6,000, you're now going to get taxed as if you made $94,000. That $6,000, all the growth that you get on that account from now until you take it out in retirement, when you pull that out, you are going to pay taxes on every single dollar at your current tax rates. So where you're kind of risking and rolling the dice a little bit is we don't know what tax rates are going to be in the future. We know what tax rates are today. And the general rule of thumb is I think a lot of people think, well, I'll probably be in a lower income bracket when I retire. Maybe, but that's not necessarily the case. It's just like, if we had a crystal ball for investments, every decision would be easy. If we knew exactly what taxes were going to look like 20, 30, 40, 50 years into the future, every decision would be easy. But that's kind of the idea behind the traditional is you get the tax benefits today and you pay the taxes in the future.
And then the flip side of that would be the Roth IRA.
Correct. So the Roth IRA, same contribution limit, $6,500 per year if you're under the age of 50, $7,500 if you're over the age of 50. But in the example I used earlier, if you make $100,000 and you contribute $6,000 to a Roth IRA, you're still going to get taxed as if you made $100,000. Now, the benefit to that is that $6,000, all the growth that you accumulate and compound over the next however many years, that is all going to be tax-free in retirement. It's a very powerful tool.
And how you've probably done this before, but how can you emphasize the importance of starting an account like that when you're in your mid-20s and you're first starting to make money?
Absolutely. So it's an example that I heard very early in my career, and I had to do the math on it multiple times because I simply didn't believe it. But say you're 22 years old, which might be a little bit young, I know, but you get the point. So 22 years old, say you contribute $2,000 to a Roth IRA. And if the account grows at an average of 8%, that means it should double every 9 years. So between 22 and 67, that's a 45-year period, that $2,000 at age 22 will be worth $64,000 at age 67, assuming it grows at 8% on average. So that's pretty powerful. So a lot of times people hear the term 2,000, you think, oh, okay, nothing to sneeze at by any means. But when you say that $2,000 today means $64,000 potentially, 30, 45 years from now, it's very powerful. So that's why it's always important. I always tell people, get started as soon as you can. It doesn't matter how big the contribution is. All that matters is you get something started.
Definitely. That was definitely a point I want to drive home, because I think a lot of people in medicine fall into the mental trap of thinking, because my income is going to exponentially go up in 4 to 5 years, they think they can wait to start saving money. But to your point, it's so valuable to save as soon as you start making money, because in the long term, it's just going to compound and grow so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, our job between, in our 20s and 30s is to build up as big of a base as we can, to really take advantage of compounding interest. So that doesn't mean if you've missed out on a couple of years of savings that you're doomed. It might just be a little bit of a wake up sign to maybe, try to catch up a little bit, once you start getting those first couple pay raises.
Cool. Way to put a positive spin on it. So at my job, basically, when you're trying to decide how much you want to contribute to your retirement, you can contribute a certain amount to the 401k and a certain amount to your traditional Roth. Is there a certain reason why you might contribute to one or the other? I know that you mentioned there's a max on the traditional Roth account, but is there a reason that you would do one versus the other?
I think it really comes down to what your current tax bracket is. I think, if you're contributing on a pre-tax basis, you are assuming that you'll be in a lower income bracket in retirement than you are today. So if someone, say you're comfortably in the 22% tax bracket, every dollar you contribute pre-tax, you save 22 cents on the dollar on federal taxes and whatever your state income tax rate is. So here in Rhode Island, that's about, we'll say, roughly 5%. So in that example, everyone's saving 27 cents on the dollar. Like I mentioned earlier, we don't know what tax rates are going to be 30, 40 years from now when we're taking these dollars out. I think some people would argue that with the amount of money and debt that the country has taken on, at some point they're going to have to raise taxes. So if we're in retirement and now we're in a 30% tax bracket, we saved at 22% to pay it at 30%. So that's where it's kind of a little bit of a where I never like to say it's a one size fits all, but usually earlier in your career, a Roth might make more sense, not only for us being in lower tax brackets when we're in our 20s, but the amount of time you have on your side for it to grow tax free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then when it comes time to determining the amount that you want to contribute from your paycheck pre-tax, is there a certain percentage of your biweekly or monthly paycheck that you would like to see people doing?
It's not a perfect one size fits all. It's a general rule of thumb is you want to be saving somewhere in the ballpark of 15 to 20% towards retirement savings. Depending at the hospital that you work at, there might be a pension option available. I don't know if that's quite as readily available as it used to be, but everyone's paying about 6% into Social Security. So somewhere between 9 and 14%, I think, is a great place to potentially start at. I would definitely say at the minimum, you want to make sure you're doing the amount that's taking advantage of the match from the hospital or the company that you work for. But I'm a big proponent of start where you're comfortable, but every year challenge yourself to bump it up a percentage or two. That seems to be a lot more stomachable than, starting right out of school with some loans and immediately giving 10% of your paycheck away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really solid advice. Start somewhere comfortable and then challenge yourself to keep going up and up. Seems like a way to not feel like you're drowning when you first start.
And I never mean to make light of it, but when it comes out of a paycheck, for whatever reason, the out of sight, out of mind, I'm not going to say you don't notice it, but it's much more manageable than having to, if the alternative was you have to open your, checkbook or go to the ATM and withdraw that money every single week and then deposit it into your retirement plan. For whatever reason, when it comes out of a paycheck, we somehow find a way to adapt to it.
I think that's how these streaming businesses have become so profitable and integrated into everyone's life, as they just take this monthly charge out of people's credit cards without them noticing. So similar concept, if you can integrate savings without really thinking about it and it automatically comes out, it's probably the most routine way to make it happen consistently.
I would agree.
So you alluded to it earlier, but do you want to talk about some of the resources and references that you would point people in the direction of if they want to take on personal financing for themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a great place to start, I honestly think it should be a must read for everyone in high school or college, but there's a book called The Psychology of Money. And I think it just challenges everyone to look at money and investing through a couple of different viewpoints. A great example is they talk about, people that are maybe our parents' age, people that are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. When they first started getting access to these types of retirement plans and investments, we were going through the 1970s, which was not a good time in the stock market. High inflation like we had today, but the market was really taken, went on like a 10-year, pretty volatile stretch. So a lot of baby boomers, look at the stock market as very risky. I don't want to say a waste of money, but potentially, they don't look at it as maybe as advantageous as maybe someone like you or myself. When we got into the workforce, we were in the middle of one of the best bear markets of all time. Sorry, bull markets. That might have to be edited. So one of the best bull markets of all time, from 2009 up until recently. The market has gone on an incredible run. So it's just the psychology of money. That book, it just challenges you to look at investments in money in a different way. Another great lesson that book shows is be careful who you take your advice from. It doesn't make sense to take your advice if your goal is to retire early. You shouldn't take investment advice from someone whose goal is to save up for real estate or have real estate income properties in retirement. So you want to make sure that you're taking advice or you're implementing a strategy that fits with what's important to you. There's a lot of great podcasts, out there. Even some companies that are technically competitors of ours, I send their podcasts to clients all the time. They do a great job of implementing, doing some high level topics, as well as bringing in some CPAs that really dig deep into the tax benefits and who it makes sense to do a Roth versus a traditional, who it makes sense to do pre-tax, who should not contribute at all. So there's a lot of great podcasts out there, but the two main books, The Psychology of Money, and then another book called The Power of Zero by Robert McKnight, I believe it is. He talks about how to build a portfolio that is as tax efficient as possible in retirement.
Nice. Very good. I'll have to look out for both of those books.
I can drop them off down the hall later.
Perfect. Yeah. Just put it. Do a couple knocks on the door. I'll open up and grab it from you. Cool, man. Well, thanks for a good episode. I think this was a great part one for our two-part series of retirement investing. You definitely were able to set the bearings for somebody who's a resident like myself, who's really unfamiliar with just how to get started. I really appreciated how you set it up as start with something you're comfortable with and then push yourself to get more and more aggressive as you start to understand what your normal budget is and how much you value your dollar. And again, I think the principle that we're learning in the 21st century is if you can have something on a cycle without thinking about it, and if you can apply your retirement savings in that same principle, it's just going to become that much easier and integrated into your everyday practice.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
All right. So everyone stick around for part 2. It'll be coming out next week, where we talk about backdoor Roths. And we talk about physicians who start making more money in their career and how to tackle the challenges that come with that big pay jump, and knowing what to look out for in that regards. All right, Tracy. Thanks for your time, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Kenny.